Hello everybody. Well, today at the Maritime Girl Microcomputer Laboratory, we're going to look at an old computer that I received for free recently. It's a custom built machine, and I can tell you that it's from around 2009. Uh, we took this out of a municipality that we have a setup installed in to cover their council meetings. It was their computer, and they were getting rid of it. We were there. They said, hey, please take this computer. And we said, okay. Or really, I said, okay. We obviously have no use for a 15-year-old computer. Oh my god, I can't believe a computer from 2009 is 15 years old now. So yeah, I took this thing home, and I was excited about it because to me, I actually thought this was a few years older. I figured this was from the mid-2000s, and as you can see, it's obviously a custom-built machine, and custom-built computers from the mid-2000s are extremely nostalgic to me. The first new computer I ever owned was a custom-built machine from 2004. I got it for Christmas of 2004, and it was one of the original computers that I covered on this channel almost 16 years ago. So I was excited to get this thing. I got it home, opened it up, was only slightly disappointed to find that it's a few years newer than I thought it would be, but it's still a pretty old computer, and I like pretty old computers, and I also especially like custom-built computers. So today we're going to look at this computer. I have not powered it on. I have no idea of its working condition. If it does work, I have no idea what operating system is running. It does have a hard drive in it, so we'll see what the original owner was running on it, and then we'll reformat it and put whatever we want on it. But yeah, I have not powered this on, so we are gonna explore this thing together. So, it's in this case, which I don't hate. It's kind of funny. The power button has got this big jewel-like indicator around it that I can only assume is a blinding blue LED, as is the style of the time. And it's funny because the hard drive activity light below it is just a red LED stuck in a hole. That's kind of funny. We got a reset button. We've got a 3.5-inch port thing for analog audio and 2 USB ports, and you can see it's been busted in a bit. I'll see if we can fix that. It's got a DVD-RW drive, which is nice. I think it's SATA, but I honestly don't remember. It could be IDE. And that's all the ventilation you get at the front, if that's even real ventilation. I think it is. So this is certainly not something you would necessarily want to build a sleeper in unless it was a low power sleeper, because that is not a lot of airflow getting through there. You do get some vents on the sides. It's actually got a little port, you know, a tube sticking inside there that goes straight to the CPU fan. And here we are in the back, and as you can see, this apparently, judging by this had an expansion card in it, presumably a GPU, but it's been pulled out, so we'll never know what was there originally. Too bad we didn't get that with it. And here's the ports we got. It's got PS2, it's got a serial port, so good legacy I/O on this thing, even though it's from 2009. We got onboard video, so we got a VGA port, we've got more USB, Ethernet, and analog audio. And there's the power supply. And let's just open it up right here, see what we've got inside it. So this is from 2009, and it has a mixture of components that are nice to see and components that are really not nice to see. Let's turn our light on here. So, first and foremost, we see an Asus M2N68AM SE2 motherboard. Quite a mouthful of letters there. This is an, I forget already, I think it's an AM2 motherboard. So this has probably an AMD Athlon 64. It could be a Sempron 64. It could be an AMD Phenom CPU. Oh man, how cool would that be? But I have no idea, but oh, how cool would that be if this had a Phenom in it? But it probably doesn't. This was apparently Asus's cheapest, most basic AM2 motherboard. Yes, I just confirmed it's an AM2 Plus motherboard. Capacitors look okay visually. And this thing has, I've only looked at this one stick of RAM. This one stick of RAM, it's got DDR2 RAM, is 2 gigs. So if we assume the other stick is 2 gigs, yeah, because the other stick doesn't have the capacity listed on it at all, I don't think. This could have 4 gigs of RAM, which for something built in 2009, not to say it wasn't upgraded over time, it almost certainly was because the 2 RAM sticks are different brands, but for something this old to have 4 gigs of RAM, that's pretty good, and that's actually the maximum, I believe, for this motherboard, at least officially. We've got PCI Express, although we still have a normal PCI slot, which is nice. Good looking motherboard. I like the gold heatsink on it, and it does have IDE, which is cool. Sadly, it does not have a floppy disk controller. If it had, I would have most definitely shoved a floppy drive in here. So here's our DVD-RW drive. It is SATA, and I forgot. This is how I got this thing. The drive is unplugged for some reason. Here's the cable for it, so I guess I'll plug it back in. Who knows? Maybe it's got a disc stuck in it, or some other it's got some other terrible thing wrong with it. I don't know, but I'll just YOLO it and hook it back in. And then the hard drives actually get a nice hard drive in it. It's a Western Digital Caviar Blue, 500. No. Yeah, it's a 500 gigabyte hard drive. So I wonder if it's not the original. You know what? Let's pull this hard drive out and see when it's from, see if it was upgraded. Okay, so I wasn't expecting this. I thought the hard drive might be from, you know, the earlier mid-2010s, but the manufacture date on it is actually January 2010. And while it's possible that this hard drive could still be an upgrade and not the original that was built into the computer, what I'm actually suspecting is that maybe this computer was actually assembled in 2010 rather than 2009, so possibly this thing was actually made the following decade. So that's cool. So yeah, it's got a good quality hard drive in it. It's got a decent motherboard, albeit a basic one. And it's got a DVD-RW drive, so, and it's been upgraded to 4 gigs of RAM, so that's pretty nice. But unfortunately, that's where the niceness ends, even if that is a lot of niceness, because we look up here, and oh boy, we have got the most garbage fire starter power supply that, you know what, I expected to see in here. This is a really lightweight, flimsy case, although actually the build quality is not the worst I've seen, but it's a very lightweight case. And when I saw a computer, when I first examined this thing and saw that it had a really lightweight case, I thought, man, this thing is gonna have the most garbage power supply in history in it. And oh boy, does it ever. This calls itself an Extreme Model RSY645, rated for 450 watts. And yeah, China's finest garbage power supply. And just, a lot of you, maybe even most of you, I don't have to say this, but I'm going to say it for anyone who needs to hear it. If you're building your own computer, you, of course, there's a world of choice available to you for all the parts you want to use, and you can spend as little or as much as you like, and I don't care if you buy the cheapest motherboard, the cheapest drives, you know, whatever, but there is one component of every PC that you absolutely must not cheap out on, in my opinion. In my opinion, it is imperative that you spend the money to buy a good quality uh, component of reputable make, and that's the power supply. Because a junk power supply in a computer can just do a world of hurt. Because unlike motherboards, hard drives, uh, optical drives, graphics cards, whatever, unlike all the other components of a computer, a power supply, if it is of non-reputable manufacture, can die, can fail in such a way that it can kill other components in your computer, or in uh, rarer cases, can actually be a safety hazard. Power supply failures killed both of the uh, K7 based custom built computers that I had in my childhood. My original custom built computer that I had, that I got for Christmas in 2004, the power supply catastrophically failed. No, not catastrophically. The power supply failed. It was a silent failure, and it killed the entire computer. The computer that replaced that computer, which we bought used, and it was about the same age. This was in the late 2000s, early 2010s. Its power supply died silently, but it killed the entire computer. And both of those computers had cheap, generic junk power supplies like this one does. If you are building a computer, spend the money, buy a power supply of reputable manufacture. I personally bought a Seasonic power supply for my main desktop computer down there. Seasonic warrants their power supplies for 12 years, at least the higher end series like the one I bought. 12-year warranty. I'll be 40 when the warranty on the power supply I bought for my main computer runs out. But just anything, Seasonic, I think Cooler Master, EVGA, they're all fine choices. Please don't buy generic garbage like this. It could kill other components in your PC if they fail, and they've been known to fail catastrophically. Sometimes, you know, shooting sparks out the back of them, you know, the components can blow up inside them, and it could potentially become an electrical or fire hazard. Anyway, all that to say is, this makes me very nervous. And we will run with it for this video, but I may yank it out, cut the wiring off it, throw it away, and stick something else in. And I really don't care if the computer itself dies, but I do care if there is a risk of environmental damage with this power supply, which there absolutely is going to be. But today, we're going to run with this. We'll see how it works, I guess. And I think that's your lot. Oh, right. I love this. The buzzer is just hanging by its wires. Like, I've never seen this before. Is this how Asus shipped the motherboard? Is this how the case, like, did the case come with this to plug into the motherboard you're choosing? Is the entire computer actually, was it actually assembled by an outfit that sells computers and this is what they do? I don't know, but I've never seen this before in a computer. It's very funny, but I guess I'll run with it. Also weird is this. Oh, actually this isn't weird. I see what this is for. This is for, yeah, so the case comes with wiring for both types of audio that your motherboard may have had. A newer or higher end motherboard would have the high definition audio, which is plugged in here, or you get a plug for the standard AC97 standard audio, if your motherboard has that. When I posted about this computer on my Mastodon page, tech.lgbt/@themaritimegirl, V Westlife, who follows me, said this was an extremely underutilized case, and right he is. We've got space for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 3.5-inch drives, and 1, 2, 3, 4 5.25-inch drives. You could make this thing into a storage server if you wanted to. There's a lot of drive bays indeed for such little computer that's in here. So yeah, I think that's your lot. I'll stick the hard drive back in. I'll round up some peripherals and plug in that power supply, and we'll see what this thing does. A computer of this caliber deserves only the finest in PC peripherals. So I've got the Logitech optical mouse that came on my first custom built computer 20 years ago. It's one of the only parts that survived the assassination of the power supply, or the assassination attempt by the power supply. I've got a keyboard that has crippling jaundice and a 25-year-old CRT monitor. So, I'm very nervous. This is my first time powering this thing on. I hate that it has this power supply, but let's see what it does. Power's on. No horrible noises, sights, smells. Let's power this thing on. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, this motherboard has a NVIDIA Enforce chipset on it. So it's got some sort of low power version of a GeForce GPU on board. Here we go. Oh, okay, yeah, so we got blinding blue LEDs. Something's making a very high-pitched noise. It went beep. And there's something it doesn't like. Probably the clock battery's dead. But let's see what it tells us visually. It's got an AMI BIOS. And yeah, the clock battery's dead. So before I go further, let me actually change that out. We'll power it off here. And pressing the power button appears to have rebooted it, maybe? So I'll just do that. I'll change out the clock battery and then we'll come back. I gotta buy more coin cell batteries. I'm down to the CR 2025s that I accidentally bought. Alright, let's do this again. Hard drive spins up. We should get a prompt here to hopefully go into the BIOS. Make sure the fan on the power supply is turning. It is. Now, I don't remember anymore, but I will add that at least one of my custom built computers that died of power supply failures, the power supplies in them, at least one of them, the power supply actually had a failing fan. The fan had, the bearings had dried up and the fan started turning very slowly, so that almost certainly contributed to its early death. Alright, let's go into the BIOS setup here. We've got a classic BIOS setup, and it's currently late at night, something like that. And today is May, 3rd, I think. I just turned 30 years old. Crazy. Okay, IDE controller, SATA, I can disable the IDE controller, we're not using it. Video RAID function, I'll start it at disabled, just in case that's how it was configured with the present hard drive. or present operating system, but I'll turn it on when we reformat it. And it sees the hard drive. It does not see the optical drive. Oh. Unless it just means it doesn't see the optical drive as as a hard drive. I don't know, we'll investigate that later. Maybe the optical drive's dead. That's okay, I've got spares. It's got an Athlon 2. It's got a quad-core Athlon 2. Holy cow, I did not expect that. It's not a Phenom, but that's actually really freaking cool. We've got a quad-core CPU in this thing. I did not expect that. I definitely didn't expect a Phenom. I definitely didn't expect a quad-core Athlon 2. That's like the second best CPU that this thing could possibly have. It's a fast one too, 2.6 gigahertz. It's also got 4 gigs of RAM. This thing is actually really built. I didn't expect that. Huh, that's really cool. This thing just became really, really cool. A freaking quad core in it, man. Holy cow. Let me fix my camera. Alright, very excited to see these, especially the CPU. That's pretty cool. Oh, this thing can overclock. That's also pretty cool. I will definitely not be touching that until I probably replace the power supply, which I'll probably do, even though I'll possibly never run this computer unattended anyway, because I don't have a clear idea of what I'm going to use it for. But I'll probably replace the power supply anyway, just for my own peace of mind, and then we can play with overclocking. For now, I'll just leave it all on auto. I'm surprised that this has such a junk power supply in it. Being a quad-core machine with 4 gigs of RAM, and it definitely had a GPU, I'm surprised that it didn't have an upgraded power supply in it. That's almost disappointing to me. Cool and quiet will enable, just because the fans are pretty noisy in this thing, actually. Sure. Sure. Does this support ECC RAM? Maybe it does. I've got lots of ECC DDR2 server RAM. Sure. 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 Definitely don't know what that is. Plug and Pay OS. We'll just leave it at no for now. I may change it to yes later. Yep. Let's make sure our CPU's not overheating. Temperatures look fine. That fan will hopefully slow down once I reboot and it has cool and quiet enabled. Oh, here's the fan function right here. Fan auto mode start voltage. Is this like the minimum voltage applied to the fan? Let's turn it all the way down. Fan auto mode start speed temp. Oh, this is cool. This is very customizable. And okay, it does see the optical drive. Good. I'll move that to there, I guess. Full screen logo, I'm going to turn... Well, let's leave it on. Let's see what full screen logo looks like on this thing. Okay. It's got easy flash. Alright, let's see what operating system lived on this thing. I'm going to guess Windows 7. Although it could very well have been upgraded to Windows 8 or 10 over its life. CPU fan slowed down. It's a little quieter. I think power supply fan's quite noisy in it. Show me a boot logo, or a post logo rather. It's got Linux Mint! What in the devil? This is a first. This is a first on the Maritime Girl. I have had dozens of computers pass through my hands over a... How long have I been tinkering with computers and getting computers for free now? 20 years? 20 years, dozens of computers. This is the first computer that's ever been passed into my hands that's running Linux. Holy smokes, that is cool. It's got a name on it that I'm gonna have to block out, but we're freaking running Linux Mint. I'm not gonna be able to go any further because it's password protected, so I don't know what version of Linux Mint we're running. That's unbelievable. That's so cool. That's the last thing I expected. I thought maybe it'd be Windows 7. I thought maybe it would be running Windows 10 and we could have some commentary about the upgradability from Windows 7 to 10. Nope. The gosh darn thing is running Linux. Blow me down. That is so funny. That is a first for this channel and for my lifetime of tinkering with computers. That's very, very cool. Alright, well... that's as far as we can go with this thing, so now we reformat it and stick something else in it. So the question becomes, what do I throw on this computer? Well, timeline-wise, the most appropriate would be Windows 7, I guess. But I've already got my Acer that runs Windows Vista, and I've run 7 on that before as well. We could run Windows 8. This thing could possibly even support Windows 10. But I've got something else in mind. An operating system that I ran on, I think, just one computer in my past, an Acer laptop that I sold in the early 2010s, that I had and sold in the early 2010s. It ran Windows XP Media Center Edition. And I almost think it would be kind of cool. I don't think I've run Windows XP Media Center Edition on any computer since then. If I did, it was only just for short term. So how about we format this hard drive and we'll put Windows XP Media Center Edition on this thing. That could be cool, and it also could be cool because I have an old USB TV tuner that was given to me recently. I can't make the thing work in a modern operating system, but I'm wondering if Windows Media Center, built into Windows XP Media Center Edition, will just work with it out of the box. Anyway, let me see if I still have an install disk for Windows XP Media Center Edition, and that's what we'll throw on this thing. This thing will be an insanely fast Windows XP machine. That's for sure. I actually just had an incredible idea. Incredible, at least in my opinion. We've been blessed with a machine that has a quad-core CPU, 4 gigs of RAM, onboard NVIDIA graphics, which includes an onboard NVIDIA RAID controller. This thing, compared to most of the other computers that have ever passed into my hands in my life, this thing is really built hardware. What if we make it even cooler? Make use of that RAID controller and do something that I've never done on any other computer, and we set up a RAID 0 array in this thing. I've done lots of RAID 1 arrays in my life, just on my main computers. RAID 1 is when you have 2 or more hard drives that are mirrored for data redundancy. If a hard drive fails, your data is safe. RAID 0 is when you use 2 hard drives and you stripe the data across them. That means that some of the data is written to one drive and some of it is written to the other drive. And the um, benefit of this is that data access is much faster than it is with just a single drive. But I don't think many people actually ever run RAID 0 because you have double the chance of losing your data, because if just one of those two drives fails, you lose all of your data. But we don't care about if data is going to be lost with this machine, and I've never run a RAID 0 array in a computer before. I think it could be really cool, really fun, and make this thing even faster than it's already going to be. This thing's going to be a beast running Windows XP, assuming I can actually make all the hardware work with XP. This thing's going to be a freaking beast. I'm very excited. Let's do that. Let me find another 500 gigabyte hard drive. We'll install it in here and we will create a RAID 0 array and install Windows XP Media Center Edition onto that. Would you believe I have the exact same drive in my parts box that's already installed in this computer? How poetic is that? I'm going to slap it in there and then we'll get going. Windows XP Media Center Edition on a RAID 0 array. I've got the second hard drive installed, and something that became an issue right off the bat is that this motherboard, being Asus's budget model AM2 Plus motherboard, it's only got 2 SATA ports. So since I want to use 2 SATA hard drives, I need to swap this optical drive out for an IDE one, which shouldn't be an issue. I also switched out the SATA cables for shorter ones, just to try and keep the cable mess under control. I now have an IDE DVD-RW drive installed. Let's put in our disk. And I need to go into the RAID controllers setup, which I believe is F10. Wait for my monitor to warm up. Yes. So, Media Shield BIOS 2007. RAID mode, we want striped. Is there mouse support? No. And you wanna, look at that, I wasn't kidding, exact same model of drive. Add that. Stripe block, optimal I guess. All data on newer, yep. Sure. And there we go. Oh yeah, it adds the sizes together, so this is a 1 terabyte array. Yep, cool. Set B, bootable, okay, and Control X, and that should be it. Now, the next challenge is going to be Windows XP does not support most RAID controllers out of the box. It's either going to do a blue screen of death before it gets past what it's doing right now, or it's going to get to the it's going to start the setup process and not see any hard drives. So I'll have to go onto Asus's website and hope they have a Windows XP driver for the RAID controller in this computer. We'll see what happens. Yes, just as predicted. Now, hopefully Asus has a Windows XP RAID driver on their website. But the challenge here is that Windows XP Setup only wants to ingest these drivers through a floppy disk. That's the only way Windows Setup can do that, unless the driver is slipstreamed into the CD. So, this thing doesn't have a floppy drive. It doesn't even have a floppy controller. And so what I'm going to have to do is hope that my USB floppy drive is accepted as a standard floppy drive, and hopefully it'll take the driver in that way. But first I gotta find the driver, so let's try that and then we'll come back. So Good Guy Asus has the RAID drivers for Windows XP, has all the drivers for Windows XP, and I think all I've got to do is extract all these DLLs to a floppy disk, or all the files in this particular directory, and all these files amount to 1.1 megabytes, so it'll fill up the floppy disk. And I have to hope that my USB floppy drive will be seen by the computer's BIOS as a standard floppy drive. It's kind of a toss-up as to whether or not that will work. Okay, floppy drive is plugged in, and what I need to do is one of the first things that the Windows XP setup does when you get to that blue screen, at the bottom of the screen it'll say press, I believe it's F7, to load a custom storage driver. So as soon as the Windows XP setup starts and it says that message at the bottom, that's what we've got to do. See our array there? And waiting for that message. F6, F6. Pressing F6. I'm assuming it got that. It did access the floppy drive briefly, so hopefully this will work. And hopefully I did everything on my end correctly, extracting the right drivers and so on. Setup could not determine the type of one or more mass storage devices installed in your system, or you have chosen to manually specify an adapter. Currently, setup will load support for the following mass storage devices: none. To specify additional SCSI adapters, CD-ROM drives, or special disk controllers, including those for which you have a... Yes, press S. Okay, pressing S. Yes, perfect. Now, I don't know which one of these I should choose. I'm going to try the first one. And it is loading it from the floppy disk. Oh, good. I'm glad that works. And then hopefully, setup will load support to specify addition. Oh, I can specify both of them. I will do that. Press S again. Load this one. I've only done this a handful of times in my life. It's not often you get a computer with Windows XP that you gotta load custom storage drivers. Okay, I'm gonna press enter to continue, and hopefully it allows us to install onto our RAID 0 array. Okay. Perfect. 1 terabyte. Here we go. And we're off. See you in a bit. Ooh, I forgot how pretty Windows XP Media Center Edition was. I'm not sure how much hardware is working out of the box and how much isn't. We at least have high color. It must be using a Vista driver. I would say it is. Yeah, so we don't really have much of anything. So, it's been years since I installed from this DVD. I'm surprised or not DVD. Is it a DVD? No, it's a CD. I'm surprised the CD still works. What service pack does this install? It does install Service Pack 3. Okay. So I'm gonna take some time, install the drivers. Gosh, it's cool to see that quad-core CPU working. If I open Task Manager, okay, so it's not hyper-threading, but we do see all 4 cores. So I'll install the drivers, and then something I want to try is some amazing people made a website called windowsupdaterestored.com. It gives you access to old versions, like they have sorry, they've recreated multiple old versions of the Windows Update website that's compatible with everything from, I think, Windows 95 through Vista. And you basically go on the website and then choose what version of Windows Update you want to run. Obviously, each version's only compatible with certain operating systems. But then it'll go through and just install updates just like it did 20 years ago. It's so cool. So I want to give it a try, and we'll do that once I have drivers installed. Alright, I got all my drivers installed. Everything's running very nicely. Now I'm going to try this Windows Update Restore. I've never done this before, and it should be compatible with just about any old web browser. Uh, Depending on, what version of Windows Update you need to access. So we're going to open Internet Explorer. And of course, this doesn't have the shipping version of Internet Explorer. We've got Internet Explorer 7, because that was included on this particular install disk because it already has Service Pack 3. And I believe you just go to Windows Update Restore.com. Oh, restored with a D. Here we go. And I believe I need version 5. Windows Update Restored version 5. Does not work. Oh, Windows Update Restored version 5 does not work out of the box at all. You will get an error if you try to use it without the prerequisites installer. Please download it first in order to properly enable access. Okay. Oh, you devil. Okay, maybe I need to... What's this link to? Huh, okay, maybe I need to access this with a modern web browser. Okay, so I did have to go on a modern computer to download the Windows Update version 5 prerequisite installer. You'll need to restart your computer at the end of the installation. Okay. So it must be installing a custom version of the Windows Update agent, by the looks of it. Setup has completed. Restart your computer. Okay. Thank you for choosing Windows Update Restored. Yes, restart. Uh-oh. I saw a pop-up there. I'm not sure what it was about, but I didn't see it until we were already in the process of restarting, so I guess we'll see what happens. Yeah, this thing just posts too quickly to see the boot logo, even though I have Quick Boot turned off. Okay, Windows Update version 5. See if it works. Oh my goodness. Wow. It has been many, many, many years since I've seen this website. That is so freaking cool. This is what it looked like when we were still, when the family computer was still running Windows 98 in the mid-2000s. I remember using this version of the website to install Windows 98 drivers. This is so cool! Oh my goodness. Actually, I can remember when my personal computer was the Compaq Presario 5360, after I had basically donated the custom-built machine to be the family computer that mostly Mum used so it could go on the internet, and then I had the 5360, which I ran Windows 2000 on. I remember looking at this website to install Windows 2000 drivers. That is so freaking cool. I want to try this with all my vintage computers now. I'll have to get a Windows 98 machine and actually try the even earlier versions of it. It's even got old news. That's great. Copyright 2024, it still says. Oh gosh, that's wonderful. Ah, and these links go to the Internet Archive. Very smart. And the home button goes to the proper home page. Holy smokes, that's great. Alright, well, we'll see what this thing does. To use the latest version of Windows Update, you'll need to upgrade some of its components. Okay. It hasn't been quite as many years since I've seen this screen, but it's been a few. It's been at least half a decade. Cool, cool, cool. And here we go. We've got 131 updates. I wonder if this includes the POS Ready updates. Oh, look at that. It's even got a driver update for the for the GPU. Yeah, I don't know if this includes the POS updates or not. Not that that really matters so much anymore. Well, let's install them. And away we go. Okay, it's the next day. I spent the rest of the evening getting Windows XP set up on this thing, installing all the updates through that Windows Update Restored website, which is just totally awesome, and I totally recommend people check that out. I think it's a really cool project. And doing some other stuff with this, and it's become apparent to me that I really like this computer. I like it a lot more than I was expecting to like it. I thought we were just gonna have a quick look at a, you know, ho-hum 2009-2010 era system, and then I found out it's got a quad-core CPU, and it's got a RAID controller, and now we're doing RAID 0, and I've got Windows XP installed, and I've actually become a little bit attached to this thing. And so, before this video ends, I want to do some more stuff with it. I want to put a GPU in it, and we're just going to test other stuff. I'm going to install a newer version of Windows, and we'll see how it runs with that too. And yeah, I really like this computer. I thought we would take a quick look, and then I would maybe sell it or find someone to give it away to, but I've actually become attached to this thing. It's a solid system. So now what I'm thinking is, I really want to get this time bomb of a power supply out of here. Now, I just happen to remember that in storage at work, we had this Antec Earthwatts 650. And my goodness, this would be a perfect power supply replacement for this thing. I mean, it's perfect amount of wattage, definitely more wattage than I need. It's 80 plus bronze. It's got a copyright of 2011 on the box, so it's been sitting in the box for a long time. But this would be perfect. We don't have any computers at the station anymore that take a standard ATX power supply. I figured I'd bring it back here, test it, and then see if I could cut a deal with the station to just buy it off the station. So I got this power supply out of storage, and I brought it back here. And I opened up the box, and I feel incredibly cheated by the universe, because inside this box was not an Antec Earthwatts 650. It was this Cool Max. It even smells. This smells like cheap Chinese electronics. Cool Max VL600B, and I googled this, and this is just the most F-tier garbage power supply that you could have bought at the time of whenever this was made. I don't know when that would have been. But it is as bad or even worse than this power supply. I read multiple accounts where people said it just died and stopped working. I read one account from someone who had one of these and it catastrophically failed and it killed his RAM and his motherboard with it. This is just the most god-awful garbage. I wouldn't put this in a computer I hated even. This is borderline dangerous to use. So I'm going to snip the wires off this and just throw it away, just like I'll eventually do with this power supply. Clearly someone bought a shiny new Antec to replace the shitty Coolmax power supply that was in their computer. So yeah, great. So I have more F-tier garbage in addition to this F-tier garbage. So that was a bust. So I've done something that I wasn't planning on doing. See, the only spare power supply I have now is a 20-year-old 300 watt Delta, which obviously isn't going to be suitable for this. It's a perfect replacement for many of my vintage computers, but it's not enough for this. So I've done something I didn't plan on doing. Newegg just so happens to be running a sale right now. There's a lot of power supplies on Newegg for sale, and I bought a brand new power supply. Didn't think I'd do that. Didn't think I'd spend that kind of money on a computer like this. But I'll give an additional reason as to why I chose to do this when that power supply comes. So that's what I've done. I've purchased a new power supply for this computer. It's on its way here. And when it gets here, we'll put it in. But in the meantime, while I'm waiting for that to come, let's keep playing with this thing. I'll show you what I've done. Alright, so here's where we're at with this thing. The Windows Update Restored was able to install, I assume, all of the updates. And just like back in the day, it did them several dozen at a time. You know, it'd install a bunch, reboot the computer, suddenly it would detect more, install those, reboot the computer, and so on and so forth. So it's very cool. What a cool little project. I really like that. I can't wait to try it on other versions of Windows. It did not install the POS Ready updates, again, just like the real thing, so you'll have to install those separately if you want to be as up-to-date as possible in Windows XP. Now, Windows Update did install that updated GPU driver, which appears to have slightly broken the GPU driver. The GPU is still working. We appear to have video acceleration and everything, but sometimes I get an error message pop up when I'm doing the most random things that say that something's broken. Like it happened when I was doing this. It appears to not be doing that anymore. I think I used to have an NVIDIA icon down here and I don't anymore. So yeah, NVIDIA control panel, yeah. Version mismatch, reinstalling. Anyway, it seems to have slightly broken that, which it could have easily done that on the real Windows update back in the day. But so other than that little quirk, it appears to have worked just fine. And another cool little thing it does fix the Windows update selection in the start menu. So when you click it, it goes to windowsupdaterestored.com, which is very, very cool. I also want to show something cool I discovered. Now, it was last year, I think, I discovered a web browser, that a community-developed web browser for Windows XP and Vista. Is called MyPal, M-Y-P-A-L. It's based on Firefox, and to this day, it works really, really well, although I don't think it's been upgraded, or updated rather, in quite a while. But just while tinkering with this computer, I accidentally discovered a new web browser that's been developed for Windows XP and Vista. It's called Supermium, and it is based on Chromium, and it also works super well. I'll open it up here. We'll actually go to YouTube, and of course this machine, even though it's 14 years old, being a quad-core system, it actually plays YouTube just fine. It even plays 720p. Here it is, loading up YouTube. And let's choose a video from someone that doesn't annoy me. And yeah, I don't have speakers hooked up, but yeah, I've already got it set on 720p, and it's playing perfectly. Really, really, really nice. Watching YouTube videos on Windows XP. Pretty great. Now, what I was hoping I could do was test this thing. It's a Pinnacle PCTV HD 880, I think it's called. It's a USB television tuner. You can see it's got a coax input on it. It can tune analog or ATSC digital signals. And it's got a little connector on here where I assume a dongle for composite or S-video inputs would have plugged into. I didn't get this with that dongle, but I may have a dongle that fits because I've gotten a couple of dongles over the years from the station. Now what I was hoping I could do was test this guy. I installed the software. It's got a built-in USB flash drive as well. So when you plug it in, it also shows up as a flash drive, which it's decided not to do for some reason. And you install the software. It has software on it, and it has an installer for that software, which is right here. Now, I don't understand this at all, but in order to use the software, you need to put in a serial code, a product ID, a license code, which is only printed on the box for the product when you bought it. This makes no sense to me because I already paid for the hardware. The software comes free with the hardware, and you can't use the software on anything but the hardware that it came with. So why do I need to put in a license code? Well, anyway, it seems very dumb to me, but I have to use the software in the trial mode because I don't have the box for it. This thing seems to be... Oh no, it is loading. I was about to say this computer seems to be quite broken because the stick never showed up in my computer, which is very strange. Yeah, things are actually not working that well. I'm not sure why. Anyway, I wasn't interested in demonstrating the software to you. I was just going to open it just to show you. What I really wanted to do... Oh, there it is. What I really wanted to do was show it working in Windows Media Center, because I believe Windows Media Center is supposed to have built-in support for USB TV tuners. But the biggest issue I've found is that after I installed the TV tuner software, or after it installed the driver for it, Windows Media Center has become fundamentally broken now. Some things I click on just cause it to completely die. It's usually settings, I think. So if I click settings, there, it's dead. The little green button is still animating, but it is completely unresponsive now. And this started after I installed the TV tuner software. So yeah, it appears to be very broken. But besides that, I'm thinking this doesn't have an option on it for watching TV, so I'm thinking maybe it's the Windows Vista version of Media Center that has the built-in TV tuner support. So I've got to kill this thing manually. So what I'm thinking is, between Media Center being broken and the video driver acting weird And there's been a couple of other weird things I've observed, especially since installing the TV tuner software. Since we're just playing around on this thing for now, how about we install Windows Vista on it? See how Vista runs? And we'll try the TV tuner in there. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll just wipe this thing and install Vista. And here is Windows Vista running on the machine. It runs just fine. So Windows Vista, you can't upgrade using Windows Update Restored. It doesn't support it. But you can't get updates normally anymore because Microsoft shut down the update service for Windows XP and Vista. But there's another community project called Legacy Update, which actually serves most of the same purpose as Windows Update Restored. I'm not sure if Legacy Update holds quite as much of the vintage user interfaces, like the original UIs that Windows Update Restored does, but it serves the same purpose, and Legacy Update does work with Windows Vista. In other news, I think this Pinnacle TV tuner, I think it just doesn't work. It's either broken, or the software is corrupted on it, or something. Because I once again plugged this in and tried to see if I could make it work in Windows Media Center, and it just doesn't. Windows Media Center does not detect that it's there at all. I did install the PC TV software that's built onto the thing, and it works. It actually scanned the channels. I had a VCR plugged into the coax input here. It actually detected that there was a signal on channel 3, and it opened up the TV viewer, but then it was just a black screen, and then the interface just froze. So it's broken on here. It was broken on Windows XP. I'm starting to think this thing just doesn't work, so I'm not going to waste my time anymore with it. I'll just donate it to the thrift store. But something that does work, you can see I have the Supermium web browser installed, and once again, it works just fine. So we're not done yet. There's still more that I want to do with this computer. And something came in the mail today. Let me show you what it is. Oh, heck yeah. As someone who already happily owns one Seasonic power supply, it only made sense to me that I would go with Seasonic again. This is a Seasonic Focus GM550. The smallest model of their Focus series of power supplies, 550 watts. And after tax and shipping, this cost me about $100. And it feels, on the one hand, really dumb to buy a $100 component to put in a 14-year-old custom-built computer. But on the other hand, I don't have any spare power supplies here. I have one power supply that's currently not being used, and it's a 20-year-old 300-watt unit that's only suitable for my vintage computers. So it's good to have a spare modern power supply around here if I ever need to throw it in my main computer. This guy will run my main computer, just barely. I won't be running folding at home or doing any gaming on it, but it will run the thing. If the power supply died and I wanted to keep editing video or whatever. So I love Seasonic. Very happy with the Seasonic Prime power supply that's in my main computer. The Prime is their high-end power supplies that have an amazing 12-year warranty. The Focus is their lower-end range of power supplies. Still excellent, you know, there's some internal technical differences, but the build quality is there just the same. It's still an 80 plus gold rated power supply, and you still get a 7-year warranty, which is just fantastic, which is great. I almost bought a Seasonic S12 Mark III. That's their lowest tier, like their budget tier power supplies, and that would have worked just fine as well. But With the Focus, you get 2 more years warranty, and I don't know how much this matters or not, but Seasonic advertises the use of Japanese capacitors in their Focus power supplies, whereas presumably they don't in their S12 Mark III power supplies, which I assume don't have Japanese capacitors. So it was only 10 or 15 more bucks to upgrade from a S12 III to a Focus, so I decided just spend the little extra money, get the Focus, just an even better power supply from an already fantastic manufacturer of power supplies, in my opinion. So, we are going to get this lovely little guy out of here, and we'll put this nice new power supply in. And once we have this power supply installed, we'll be able to try something else that I want to do with this computer, and that's put a GPU in it. And I've got a GPU that I think will be perfect for this thing, but let's put in the power supply first. Ain't she pretty? There it is, the Seasonic Focus. Got a nice big fan in there with a metal grill. That is a sweet looking piece of equipment, and it's quite heavy as well. There you go. And you might have just seen, it's a semi-modular power supply, so you get some permanently attached cables, but then you also have a little bit of modular expandability. That's great. They give you a bag of modular plug-in cables there to add what you need. And they give you complimentary zip ties, screws, and Velcro straps. Very, very, very nice. They don't give you an egg bag like you get when you buy one of the Prime power supplies, but that's alright. And then kind of neat, they also give you this thing, and when I made the video of building the current iteration of my main PC, this was a couple of years ago now, when I was unboxing the Seasonic Prime power supply, I took this out and I'm like, what the hell is this? I don't know what this is. And then at least one person commented with the answer, which is that this is a power supply tester. This plugs into the motherboard connector, and I don't know if you can see in there, there's 2 pins right there that have actually been jumped across. And so what you do is you plug this into the motherboard connector, and it connects the right pins together to make the power supply turn on, even though it's not connected to a computer. And the purpose of this is you get the peace of mind of being able to power the power supply on and make sure it's not going to blow up or anything before you even put it in the computer. So if I just take this and plug this in there, turn that on, and then turn this on, it should just power on. And there it is. I heard a chunky relay click, and it's just running. And it's silent. This power supply is a loud fan. There's nothing wrong with the fan. It's not like bearing noise or anything. It just blows a ton of air, which is good. I don't hear anything from this guy, but I do feel the airflow. Very, very, very nice. For some reason, I thought this had the hybrid fan mode switch that the Prime has that you can enable, and then what that does is it actually doesn't run the fan until the temperature reaches a certain point. This one I thought had that, but apparently they don't. But that's okay, it's silent anyway. Sweet. This passes the bench test, so let's go ahead and throw it in here, get this guy out. I'm excited. I just want to try something here. I'm very curious as to how these power supplies compare in weight, because let me tell you, just taking this guy out, it's a huge difference. So let's see what the Seasonic weighs. I'll try not to include the weight of the cables. I just want the weight of the power supply itself. And the Seasonic weighs 1 pound 6 ounces and a half. And then our Extreme 450 watt power supply, 10 ounces. That is less than half. This thing weighs less than half the weight of the Seasonic, despite only being rated 100 watts less. That is insanity. That is looking pretty sharp. Yes, indeed. Let's power it on, make sure the computer still works. Oh my god, it's so quiet now! Holy crap, the sound output of this thing has like... it's dropped by like 80%. Wow. Cool. You know, it's kind of funny. This power supply actually doesn't perfectly fit in the case. If you look right there, you can see a gap there. It just doesn't fit properly in this equally cheap, crappy case. I can almost guarantee that this case and this power supply were sold as a package deal. They probably came together. I don't know if that's a practice that's still common today, but in the 2000s, it was common, I think, for cases and power supplies to come together. You gotta give it to the person who built this thing, though, assuming an individual built it. They bought cheap, crappy case, cheap, crappy power supply. Not crappy, but the cheapest motherboard that Asus sold for the CPU socket, and then they just dumped all of their cash into the CPU. It's kind of awesome. So, next step is GPU. So I'll dig out the GPU we're gonna try out and show it to you first. But I also want to say I'm not gonna keep Windows Vista rather on this thing. Oddly enough, it feels less appropriate running Windows Vista on a computer from 2010 than it does to run Windows XP, a much older operating system, on a computer from 2010. So we're going to put XP back on this, but I'm not going to go with Media Center Edition again. I'm going to try another flavor of Windows XP that I've never used before, but we're going to try it on this, and it's Windows XP X64 Edition, the 64-bit version of Windows XP. I've checked ahead of time. Asus did write 64-bit Windows XP drivers for this motherboard, and there are also 64-bit drivers for the GPU we're going to put in. So let me show you what GPU we're going to try out. I couldn't find any information on if anybody had ever tried running 8 gigabytes of RAM in this motherboard. The official maximum is 4 gigs. I happen to have an extensive collection of DDR2 RAM, probably 30 or 40 modules in this bag, so I did go through to see if I had any 4 gigabyte modules, and I don't. Actually, the largest modules I have are 1 gigabyte, and the ones on this motherboard are 2 gigabytes, so I've kind of won that way. So I guess we'll just stick with the 4 gigs. Of course, being a basic motherboard as this was, it's only got 2 slots. If it had 4 slots, we'd be able to upgrade it to 6 gigs, maybe, if it were supported. But I will be fine and dandy and happy with the 4 gigs. Now, onto the GPU. Oh, heck yeah. This is a NVIDIA GeForce GTX 770 that a viewer in Australia by the name of The GeForce very generously donated to me in 2020, and I ran this GPU in my main computer for about 6 months until someone else gave me a newer and more powerful card to put in. But I've always kept this card. I would never get rid of this card. It's an awesome card that was donated to me by an awesome person. So I figure, given that this is an NVIDIA-based board, which is kind of funny because it's an AMD CPU, of course, 14 years ago, they weren't quite the same rivals as they were today. But it's an NVIDIA chipset, so I figure I best go with an NVIDIA card. So we are going to stick this guy in, and actually this is going to be an enormous issue because... Oh no, are you kidding me? Oh, I'm just realizing this now. I don't think we're going to be able to get this card in here. I mean, the hard drives are definitely in the way, but even if they aren't in the way, I don't know if this wall of the drive cage is going to interfere or not. I better shut this thing down, pull the hard drives, and see if I can even get this card in here. Well, I'm awfully let down, but it's true. This card will not physically fit in this case. I can't plug it into the motherboard, so... Aw, how sad. Well, that's okay. Back in the box you go until, maybe some other computer comes along. Now, I do have two other cards that are potential contenders for this thing. The first is this NVIDIA Quadro FX 3800. And this thing has like a quarter of the graphics power of the GTX 770, but it's still period correct. It's a 2010 card. And it does appear to be, if I slide it in cockeyed, it should be able to fit in this motherboard. So we have this card, but then I also have this Radeon HD 4870. Which is also period correct. This is a 2009 card, but it's got at least 50% more graphics power than the Quadro does. But it's not an NVIDIA card, it's a ATI or AMD card. So the question is, do we upset the order of the universe and put a AMD GPU in a motherboard with an NVIDIA chipset and just see what happens? I don't know. I read in the past, you know, when I was a kid, that you should never put an AMD card in a motherboard with an NVIDIA chipset, or actually some people back in the day said you shouldn't put an NVIDIA card in a motherboard with an AMD CPU. But this thing is an AMD CPU and an NVIDIA chipset, of all things. So, I don't know. I think it's all hogwash. You know what? Let's just stick in this GPU, and we will see how well it plays ball on a motherboard with an NVIDIA chipset. And both of these cards still require extra power to be supplied to them, so I'm still justified in buying the power supply. Phew! Also, this card's kind of cool because this is not the original cooler. I got this card with a cooler with no fan on it, and the only way to, or the best way I found to get a fan onto it was to remove the cooler entirely, and I rednecked this cooler from a dead power color GPU onto it, and yeah, it just screwed right in and it fits. So this card's kind of a hack job brought back from the dead. Yeah, let's throw this guy in and see what happens. There we go. I had to use all but one of the extension cables provided with the power supply to get everything plugged in, but we're ready to go. So I guess before I go any further, I better make sure this thing still boots up. That may be a negatory. Oh no, never mind. I thought it was post-looping for a second there. Oh, I don't have the power supply plugged, or the power supply. I don't have the monitor plugged in. I don't even have an adapter on me, so let me grab one, just a sec. Alright, no driver installed, but it is working, so that's good. Unfortunately, the what silence I gained putting in the new power supply has now been completely reversed, even more so with this GPU. Even though I redneck the fan on it, the fan does have variable speed capability, I believe. It was pretty quiet while the computer was booting up, but now it's ramped up. Maybe, hopefully, once I get the driver installed, it will calm down. It is pretty warm already, so hopefully just without the driver, the card is not running efficiently. Also, I forgot to check and make sure AMD made XP 64-bit edition drivers for this card, so I'll check that. I gotta figure out where to get a Windows XP x64 ISO, and then we'll move on with installing Windows XP x64 edition on here. Feel the power of high-performance 64-bit architecture. Well, here we are, Windows XP x64 edition. That was weird. I'm not sure what just happened just now with the monitor. But this is my first time ever using the 64-bit version of Windows XP, and it seems to work fine. I got the web browser to install and run no problem. Everything had drivers for the 64-bit version, so all the hardware is working with no problems. What I couldn't get working was Windows Update Restored, even though it says it supports Windows XP 64-bit edition, or x64 edition. 64-bit edition is the Itanium version, x64 edition is the x86 64 version, but I'm probably going to keep getting them mixed up. Windows Update Restored says it's compatible with x64 XP, but when I installed it, it just, like, I would go to Windows Update to go to the website, and it would just say, sorry, Windows Update encountered an error. So what I instead did was installed the, it wouldn't be correct to call it the competing product, because both projects acknowledge each other and acknowledge each other as valid and excellent projects. But I installed the other project, which is called Legacy Update, which came before Windows Update Restored, and it works just fine, and it installed all the updates, a ton of updates. I installed Microsoft Office 2007, which is actually the last version of Microsoft Office compatible with Windows XP x64. Office 2010 never got a version for x64, although I assume you can install and run the normal 32-bit version of that Office. But yeah, Legacy Update works just fine. Installed drivers for Windows and Office. And yeah, that GPU in there, that AMD Radeon HD 4870, it's loud. Like, the fan, it really revs up, even just sitting here idle. And if we look at Speed Fan, which also works, we're doing 77 degrees, doing little more than just sitting here. And I believe I pasted the chip on it when I rednecked that heatsink and fan on there. And I say rednecked, but it's actually installed properly. The bolt pattern matched up. And so that cooler on that GPU, even though it's not the original cooler, it ought to be working just fine. It's definitely conducting heat because the air exhausted by the fan is very hot indeed. So this GPU just must run really hot. Either that or there's some driver issues going on and it is not idling properly. But as you can see, we're running very, very hot just sitting here, and the fan is running quite quickly. Now, I ran Passmark performance tests because I want to compare this computer to, I figured the most appropriate comparison would be to the Dell Optiplex, I forget what it's called, a Dell Optiplex something or other. It was a Core 2 Quad Dell Optiplex from 2010 that I used as my main computer as recently as 3 years ago, I think, 4 years ago. And this computer is about the same age, so I thought they'd make a good comparison. Now, unfortunately, I had to run a very old version of Passmark Performance Test 8.0, even though I believe 10.0, definitely 9.0, and I think 10.0 are both list compatibility with XP x64. However, when I ran the setups for both, Windows just threw an error that said this is not a valid Win32 application. So program compatibility for XPX64 is definitely not perfect. So most of the results make sense, and one of them doesn't. So the CPU score of 3188, that is slightly lower than the Optiplex with its Core 2 quad, which makes sense because that Core 2 quad I assume would have had hyper-threading, and also I believe it ran at a higher clock speed, so that tracks. The 2D graphics mark, it's slightly higher than the NVIDIA GeForce GT 610 that I ran in that computer, so that tracks. But here's where it stops making sense. I get a 3D graphics score of 306. That is less than the GeForce GT 610 that I ran in the Optiplex, and that makes no sense because according to Passmark's own charts on their website, the Radeon HD 4870 is at least triple the graphics power of the GeForce GT 610. Yet I got a result that's actually lower. This should be around 1200 and not 300 according to Passmark's own website. So I don't know if it's throttling again because it appears to just be running hot all the time. I don't know if it's throttling to Kingdom Come. Is there a driver issue? I don't know. But we'll move on here. Memory mark is slightly lower. That tracks because this is a DDR2 machine, whereas the Optiplex was DDR3. And the disk mark is actually slightly higher, which tracks because I ran a RAID 1 mechanical hard drive array in the Optiplex, and this is a RAID 0 mechanical hard drive array. And it was still 500 gigabyte drives in the Optiplex as well. At least one of those two drives in the Optiplex was the same model of drive that's in this computer, which means one of the drives in this computer is probably the drive that I had in my Optiplex. So this tracks where we've got a slight speed advantage for having RAID 0. So it all tracks except the 3D graphics mark. It makes no sense to me. That should be at least triple, actually probably closer to quadruple the score. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that card and I'm going to stick in that NVIDIA Quadro that we also considered putting in here, and I'm going to see how that card compares to this card. I installed the NVIDIA Quadro FX 3800. And first of all, man, this card is so much quieter than the HD 4870. That's almost worth using it over that alone. But I installed the drivers and I ran the Passmark 3D graphics test, and now things make even less sense. First of all, our score 668. Once again, this is about half of what Passmark says it should score based on their own charts on their own website. So again, I have to wonder, is Windows XP x64 causing a big performance drop for some reason? Or is it this old version of performance test that I have to use? Does that score the 3D mark differently? I wouldn't think it does, because everything else seems to score in line with what a modern version would give you. So I'm not sure. But where it makes even less sense now is that this score is higher than that of the HD 4870. Yet according to Passmark's charts, the HD 4870 scores almost double the FX 3800. So things are really not making sense now. So I'm just too curious. I have to figure out what's going on here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to install an IDE hard drive and put Windows 10 on it. We'll test both of these cards again and we'll see what Windows 10 scores. Here we are in Windows 10. I've tested both cards. I actually used the same version of Passmark as I did in Windows XP, and now things are making way more sense. The Quadro scored 844 and the Radeon scored 1498, so that makes way more sense. So I would say either the drivers for Windows XP x64 just are not optimized properly or whatever, or Windows XP itself just doesn't make use of the hardware optimally. But there you go. Glad I got that out of the way. So I'm going to do one more thing before we wrap up this video. I'm going to plug the RAID array back in, get us back into Windows XP, and I'm going to try one more thing, and that's overclocking this thing. Now, the big limitation I see is this cooler is pretty darn small for this thing. But we're just going to try it anyway, and we'll try some overclocking and see how far we get. Alright, so what do? We have multiple options here. We've got auto, which seems to be no overclocking, manual, standard, and overclock profile. So what happens if I go overclock profile? Ah, okay. Let's just go straight for 7 and see what it does. See if it breaks. That's when we know we've got it dialed in, when something breaks. Aha! We're at 2783. Oh boy, what a jump. We can do better than that. Manual. CPU frequency. Let's go 233. Let's bump up the voltage. Let's go plus 50. What do you think of that? Oh, I don't know that she liked that. We have no post. I think she died. So I gotta go a bit less on the overclock, I guess. I'll play around here and then I'll come back when I've got results. Well, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little disappointed. I did some research online just to see what other people got this CPU to overclock to, and people had this thing going upwards of 4 gigahertz. Well, I could not achieve even close to the same. 2.8 is the best we got, and that's up from 2.6. Now, I'm not a professional in overclocking, but I don't not know what I'm doing. Recall that my old main computer, based on an Asus P60 motherboard and a Xeon CPU, that was, I think, a 2.4 gigahertz CPU, and I had it overclocked to 3.8 gigahertz stable. And actually, I was able to get it to 4 gigahertz, not so stable, but I ran it overclocked from 2.4 to 3.8 gigahertz for however long I used that computer. I think it was a year or two, and I had some people who were really, you know, experienced in overclocking. I had them super surprised that I was able to achieve that. But I couldn't pull off the same here. Could be other parts of the motherboard that just aren't as stable. Could be capacitors, you know, could be a lot of things. But that's what we got it to. Now, right now, we're running pretty okay on the temperature. I do want to give a shout out to whatever on the motherboard's currently doing 128 degrees below zero. That's pretty good. That it balances out everything else. But we are going to run Prime 95. Now, once again, just because Windows XP x64 does not have perfect compatibility with either 64 or 32-bit software, I had to go back and download an old version of Prime 95. The new version will not run on this, either the 32 or 64-bit version, which I'm kind of surprised the 32-bit version doesn't run. So I've got a really old version here that does run for some reason, and I'm just gonna run the blend test and away we go. And we're gonna see how hot this CPU gets with this very itty bitty cooler that's on here that I don't have a whole lot of faith in. Temperature's climbing. How much power are we using? We're only using 190 watts of power. Idle this thing does around 140, I think. So not too big of an increase in power. CPU temperature is climbing. The fan is speeding up. But we haven't crashed yet. And what that tells me is that the CPU is probably not the limitation to overclocking. It's probably something else on the motherboard. Or maybe I just truly don't know what I'm doing. We're at 60 now. I'm just going to let this cook for a few minutes and then I'll come back. Well, we've been cooking for maybe 10 minutes. We haven't gone past 70 degrees, which is pretty impressive. But I also can't help but wonder if the CPU is throttling itself. No easy way to check that on Windows XP. Of course, Windows 10 or 11 will give you a live readout of the CPU frequency. But overall, not bad. At the very least, it's smart enough to throttle itself. So I'll just kill that. And guys, I'm going to stop it here. If you're still watching after all this time, thank you so much for sticking around and helping me tinker with a random custom-built computer from probably 2010. And boy, we did a lot of stuff in this video. I know a long time ago I checked and I had about 90 minutes of raw footage, so I am not looking forward to how much more I've added to this. But yeah, there was just something about this machine that I was just really taken by it. I think maybe the fact that it's a quad-core AMD system. I usually don't have AMD systems pass through my hands. I always get Intel systems. So to have an AMD system, and one that's not a Sempron for once, that was pretty cool. And just the fact that it's a pretty high-end CPU. It's maxed out with 4 gigs of RAM already. It's got a RAID controller, so we were able to experiment with a RAID 0 array, which I'm definitely going to keep in here. The thing runs Windows XP, it runs Vista, it runs 10. It gave me an excuse to blow some money on a new power supply. Yeah, this has been really, really fun to tinker around with. I don't know what I'm going to do with it now. It would be the ultimate Windows XP machine if only it had a floppy controller, but it doesn't. So, granted, it still can be an excellent Windows XP machine if I want to use my USB floppy drive. But, yeah, I don't know. I may never touch this thing again. I'm not sure what I'll do with it, but it's been an awful treat tinkering with it and seeing what we've got here and doing it along with you guys. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.